adjunct faculty at William Peace University, and I have the lovely opportunity to work with our nursing students. These are RN and BSN students, and so I've had the luxury of working with students that they're paying their money, which is good, right? But they are there because their job told them they have to get this degree, and so therefore the level of energy that they give me is usually lackluster. So I have started to reframe how I think about the work that I ask them to do, because we had very specific and set assignments, and what I noticed was we were focusing a lot on the final product, but what I know about nursing, what I know about students is sometimes a lot of that information and learning happens more in the process and less of that final product that I would get to see. So this led me to create this presentation, and so this is a round table, so we're not quite round in table shape, but this is really going to be a conversation for each of us to kind of have and talk about really how do we assess those things, and how do we, what can we learn from their drafts, the decisions they make, and their discovery. So this is an opportunity for me to redefine the student progress and how they are growing. So obviously, we always need to have some good objectives that are up here. And so today, these are the objectives that we're going to have. We're going to really identify, we're going to analyze, and we're going to evaluate. So I really want us to talk about how can we grow in our learning and our thinking as we're working with our students. So this is just to share with you, there was a national study of writing that was done by Stanford University, and they found that students who were completed 2 or more drafts demonstrated deeper reasoning, more accurate conceptual understanding, and stronger metacognitive skills. And this, even when there wasn't an improvement necessarily in the final score of the outcome, just with those different draft processes, they were able to see that growth. So this leads me to ask us, and I want us to kind of take a moment to talk about this. How do we measure progress in ways that value student growth, reflection, decision-making, and not just the final outcome? So what do you all do? Do you ask for drafts? Do I just pull it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's on. Anybody want to? What do you all do? Oh, this is right up your alley, right?
It is, and we've been talking ad nauseum.
Not at nauseum. At nauseum?
That's my high school Latin.
You also use the mic so that, the recording can capture it.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about process as well, but I don't think it's as much about us identifying their progress as much as it is about them reflecting on their progress. We can see, certainly, but I like that to be a collaborative process with the students, thinking about how they're growing. So they have 3 major projects in my class. These are first semester, first year Elon students, and they get the opportunity to revise 2 of the papers after extensive feedback from myself and sitting in one-on-one grade conferences with them. And I appreciate that this is perhaps not ideal for people with large classes either. And then they have to reflect on each piece, why they chose not to evaluate one of the pieces that they included, and to do an overall assessment of their growth as writers.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Anyone else have any thoughts of how do you measure the value of the student growth, reflection, or decision making?
This is just a thought, but you may be able to ask students to evaluate each other's work, to ask what is good about it, and then to try to assimilate some of what you thought was good about their work into your own work. And I think that exercise might be effective.
Yes, yes. And so we'll talk a little bit later about how you can incorporate those activities in there.
I hide the fact that they're working on a final thing by just assigning the little steps, and then in a future assignment saying, going back to, and they have to go back and look at what they wrote, in August maybe. And really, I'd split it up because it's a large class, and grading little chunks is far easier than big things.
Absolutely. And so this was something that I found in a project that I had the students working on. This was a project in which we decided to break it down from one big major project at the end to where it now was 4 assignments throughout. And that was very helpful for a couple of reasons. One, for them, they were able to build on it because as I mentioned, a lot of the students I was working with, they are working professionals. And so they were procrastinating. And then the quality of work was suffering because they couldn't give it their full attention because life would happen close to the time of that project being due. So by doing it this way, we were able to break it down into small parts. It was easier for them to accomplish those small parts. But then the editing that happened along the way was very helpful for them to reflect and see, but also for me to be able to help those that were way off track get on track, and therefore their grade didn't have to suffer from that one major project being the big issue or problem. So just some beginning things is having that brainstorming. So if you're having them to select a topic, think of a topic, having them to actively brainstorm, and that is an assignment, because I think a lot of times we skip the brainstorm and we say, so tell us the topic you're selecting. Well, let's talk about how does brainstorming work? What's the purpose of it? And where can you use things to get you to see a lot of different topics to then decide on that major one you're going to choose. Also, then we had another piece was problem identification. So this is where they had to identify a problem that was connected to their brainstorming, and they had to decide what is this, this project specifically was about a patient population. So they had to narrow down, focus on one patient population, and then find the problem they were going to identify. As you can imagine, they had all of these ideas that they wanted to do. But what is one problem that you identify? Then that moved to the next piece where it was the research. So then I asked them to, hey, let's bring in some research into this, because I know you think a lot of things are problems. Does the research agree with what you think? And if you've ever worked with some nurses have a lot of theories on problems, but does the research speak to that? And then also this was an opportunity for me to really encourage them to check the evidence to see which way does it say, because a lot of them were going in biased at an angle. And so this is where I had them to reframe their thinking to see, well, from another perspective, does it have that same issue? And then the end was just that putting it all together. And then that's where they had that big collective project that they did. Now, when looking at these items, really, I think, do you all have any projects or any ideas or things that you feel like you could break your projects down or break your writing process down, those type of things? Can you imagine how some of that may work? So then we have another question. So this is, again, I want to hear from you all. What do you think the primary learning goal is of your assignment? So I think a lot of our faculty really get so pressed on the actual, this is what I want them to do, but what's the purpose of it? What's the goal of that assignment? And if you're working with any faculty who have been in a course for a really long time, they may have lost the goal because they get so stuck on, these are the projects, these are the writing assignments we have, and they need to do these writing assignments. But what's the purpose of it? And when you go back to the purpose, you may find that you really want to see their thought process, and you're not seeing that with just one final product. Also, is this a skill, understanding, or competency? Is this assignment designed to develop or demonstrate? And then the last question just really is, does the assignment ask the students to show mastery of content, process, thinking, or all three? So if you're thinking about some of your projects or things that you've helped people with, do you think that the faculty are leading the assignment with this? Or do you think they're really kind of getting stuck on the final outcome? Depends. I see some head nods of they're really stuck on what they want them to do. Anyone have any thoughts you want to share? You object? Okay. I'm coming back to you.
No, I'm being a little facetious.
Okay.
The faculty that Todd and I work with are actually in a position to either think this way ahead of time or to be easily convinced that this is a good route to be content process and thinking oriented in their assessments.
Almost all of them.
Yeah, almost all of them.
Not all of them.
Not all of them, but the faculty come with a lot of open-mindedness and a lot of training. So yeah, I think that our faculty do a nice job with this, but I think that this is a general problem.
General problem that we're seeing. Anyone else have any thoughts? Did you want to share your thoughts? Yeah, I'd love to hear them. Round table, round table. No, no worries.
So you were talking though, and what we're seeing is our students are using AI to generate their outlines and their ideas. But I always stress, and this is an opportunity here for them to look at the intersection of the personal with the professional. So any good research will engage them over the span of a career if it stems or emanates from a really personal space. So I provide frameworks for my class, my assignments, pedagogies, but I really like the students to be drivers of this. So this is a good opportunity for them also to collaborate on the outcomes and the goals. So a short video introduction using Kaltura on Moodle, for example, with some prompts that I am the only one that sees. That's where they tell me about themselves, engage with questions around the course content, connect the personal with the course, why they're there outside of I need to satisfy a requirement. And I can always go back at the end of the semester with them and said, here's what you said you wanted to do. Did you achieve your goals?
That's really great. Thank you for bringing that into the discussion, because I think that is important to really understand what is it that the students want to get out of the class and what is it they want to learn, because sometimes they may not align. So how can we see if we can bring those things together? And so another thing just to share with you is some ways that I kind of looked at this when I was sharing this with my other faculty peers and how they can kind of look at their process of their big projects. We kind of did some breaking down into things. So we had one, this is that brainstorming or idea map. So depending on how you think of things, you may look at it more of brainstorming, or it may be an idea map that you truly write out and you're stemming things off of it. But then we go to that outline, that blueprint. What does that look like? How can we work that in to the things we talked and thought about? How can we bring that into an outline and get it to be a little bit more formal? That's when I love to have them to add the research. One of the things that I was finding is because these were already professional students that had been at a school for some time, coming back into school, they submit papers that are citations only. It's literally like all citations. And I have to remind them that the citations should enhance your work, not be the work. So how can we bring those two together? So by having them to outline before bringing in the research, that allowed for them to have some original thinking that happened before they got to the evidence and the citations. And then that's when you can decide if you want to have a mini draft that's due, and or you have them do a small submission or even the submission of the full work, but then they're going to do another version after that. And so this became important because as some of the other instructors were doing this in different styles, not necessarily for a paper, they were able to kind of see how this could flow out regardless if it's a paper, a PowerPoint, or anything that could use that same concept. Okay, so this is another question that I want to just ask you. When you think about your learners, and you mentioned AI, so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but what reflective skill do you wish they used more often? And we could just generally say we wish they would reflect, right? That's overarching.
You stole my answer.
Oh no.
Reflection. Or taking time.
taking time.
Take in an assignment and think about it before they start checking boxes.
Okay, that's great. So taking time and really looking at the assignment before they start checking boxes, really absorb what the assignment is asking for them to do. Okay, what other things? Yeah.
If it's like a discussion forum or group things, reading other people's answer, taking their perspective, and then responding, not just like the first line of it, but actually reading through everything and responding so that it's respectful that they've read through it.
Yes, so that's another piece. So with this program, it's strictly online. So there's a lot of discussion boards, and we know how discussion boards work, right? You have to read and you have to post, and then you have to respond. And whatever number you say they need to respond to, they're going to read just that amount. So I have had to have discussions of, I can see how many other people's you opened via Moodle, Canvas, whatever. So if we're looking for participation, you can't get your participation grade as a full number because you've only opened one other person. So let's participate. Let's really engage. So I think that's another thing. And also not only just reading one person's, but actually fully reading one person's, absorbing it, and then using that to kind of move you forward. I think that's another good one. Yeah.
Perhaps something else would be, I don't know, it's okay, thank you.
For the recording.
Sure, okay. Perhaps it would be helpful as well to have the learners consider their fundamentals. They can start with definitions and premises. They can begin to look at their assumptions and their structure of their rational thought. But I just, to keep it as simple as possible, right? Perhaps part of the disengagement that you mentioned is related to affect. Right? And an insecurity drives them to fill a paper with citations, right? Rather than kind of relying on the robustness of their own thinking. So we can perhaps reinforce that for them by helping them learn about the fundamentals as in definitions and premises.
That is awesome. That is a great way to think about it, because I do think that I try to always remember and think from the student perspective whenever I have an assignment. And so I think that's really important to think about from their perspective. They may not know where this is a topic they're not well versed in. And so they're doing the best they can by finding citations, and they're trying not to plagiarize. So they just do a whole paper of citations. So I think that is a great thing to just look at it from the student perspective. Thank you for sharing that. So another way that I thought of that I worked with my students to really help make sure that we were really incorporating moments of reflection, because I noticed they were not doing that, was I have 3 different opportunities for them to use reflection in their work. So one is a self-reflection. This self-reflection could just be as simple as, now that you've written this, and they turn it in, and then I say to them, you take a review of your paper and review it against the rubric. So then that's them. The hope I encourage from the beginning is make sure you're following the rubric. When I've received papers, I can tell they did not look at the rubric because there's a whole section they did not even incorporate. So therefore, that's when you really want to make sure that they can reflect on their own work to say, oh, wow, I didn't even acknowledge this whole portion because I was so focused somewhere else. Then also we have done peer review. Now, how many of you all do peer review? Peer review can get a little tricky sometimes, right? Peer review is similar to a discussion board where they'll respond not fully, they're kind of half doing it. So peer review, I've done it in a few different ways where I've had peer review where they actually were reviewing someone's paper. It was anonymous, they didn't know whose paper it was. But then also in person in class, I've had them review each other's papers, and I had very guided prompts of what they were to respond to. Guided prompts of what do you think the theme was visible? Do you feel like the theme was throughout? So therefore it provided actionable items that they were to look at and look for, instead of just like, how did you like their paper? It needed to be very guided because one, with a lot of the nursing students that I work with, writing was not a place where they really enjoyed and or had fun with. And so therefore guiding prompts made it very, I would say very clear to them, almost checklisty, because and the population of nurses I'm working with, they're checkers, they're box checkers. They need to make sure they're doing what they need to do. So that was very simple for me to have a checklist, a rubric, a guide, and prompted questions for them to use. And the other piece is AI. AI is another great way. We could go simple. Here's your paper, here's a rubric, put it in AI and use it. But also then they could have guided questions that I create and or that they can create to use AI in order to assess their paper and that type of work. So that's another way. Anyone else have the students use AI to assess their papers, or any thoughts on that? Yeah. Thank you.
So my colleague that I traveled here with will be talking about her framework for the use of AI. And I've learned so much in talking with her and working with her. And one of the things that the use of AI promotes is the construction of a good prompt, an effective prompt. And an effective prompt can't be written without reflection on the whole process. And so it kind of blew my mind, and I thought, wow, this is like such a hugely valuable, transferable skill, and it's just very reflective. It's going to take some training because the students don't care at this point what it spits back out. They just cut it and paste it. So there's a lot involved in restructuring the assignments to incorporate the submission of their chat log from AI so that we can capture the evolution of their prompting. And it's just been a really rich experience.
Thank you for sharing that. Has anyone else used AI and have your students show what their AI prompting is and or their work? I've had one of my other faculty members, she actually has an assignment that is specifically AI. It is a specific AI assignment in which they then showcase that whole chat log, and there are specific things she's looking for in that chat log. And that is, we do that early in the semester, and that's specifically because we wanted them to see how AI can be your friend or your biggest enemy. And so therefore we do that very early on. So that's one way that we use it.
I was just going to say, I work in faculty development, so I'm not teaching, but that's how we encourage, especially the naysayers of using AI. I don't want them to use it at all. And then if they're using it and being cited for plagiarism, we say, if they're going to keep using it, just have them submit how they use it and the history of it and what prompts they use. So we use that.
Yes, I think that's really good. Now, in my writing group over there, do you have them submit their chat logs or have discussions about their?
We are mandated almost to, so we have to this year.
Oh, as of this year, a new mandate. No worries.
So this year we had to actually incorporate an AI assignment in any structure into our writing classes. So we do a lot of focus on process and comparing mind over matter and AI versus HI, human intelligence. So we will have them actually use different AI, generative AI tools and use the same prompt and compare them. I saw one of my colleagues do a master class in this a couple weeks ago, where she had a scenario. There were students who were at one time presenting to this city council for an initiative. There were a group of fact checkers, and as they presented live, these students were fact checking their references, noticing broken links, things that didn't exist, where they cut and paste, telling them about it on the spot. So there's a lot of comparison between what humans produce and what AI will produce in this writing process as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, go ahead. I have another good question to ask you all just for my learning. Go ahead.
Just a quick comment to share. We have a grad student that we're working with now that developed basically it's like a front-end AI that interfaces with ChatGPT so that, so he happens to be in computing sciences in our engineering school, but it's designed for teachers to be able to, so you have your students use that as your entry point, and then it will report back to you. And I think we're going to see more and more and more of this over the next, I mean, it'll be here, in no time, right?
Yes, and so is that kind of an LLM that they need to use?
Yeah, so in this case.
Or a chatbot?
It's that weird kind of line, like it's sort of AI, it's sort of chatbot, but basically what it's doing is it's collecting that. It can look through the entire history of that student's interactions with it. It can see how they used it. It would flag something that didn't come from that. So if they were using outside sources, it would flag that. So, I mean, it's. I think that's where we're going, and I think, we're going to see that across the board in the next few years.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so the question that I have for you all is, when looking at AI and how it's used, do you all have any process for how they incorporate it? So a lot of people have AI rules. A lot of universities, does everyone's university or school have a rule about it? Okay, so at the university I'm at, it was mandated that everyone have something in your syllabus about it, but they were open to you, the instructor can decide. So we, as a program, we decided how we wanted to use it. I was probably the most flexible of all of the faculty, but I wanted to be able to let them use it because some of the work that is in my specific course is very much so free thinking, and so they may use it to help them brainstorm. They may use it to help identify the major problem for that population. So it was a community health class. So that was where it was okay for my class. But when some of the other classes, we're really looking for more of their original thinking, and so it's not as acceptable. And so that's where I just wanted to know from you all, do you have strict policies? And if you do, how is that going? I'm coming.
Right. So I'm in corporate instructional design, so the legal department really is rather strict about our use and concerns about plagiarism. So my approach is generally metacognitive, where I ask people to use the AI to query their own reasoning and their assumptions, and the sort of thing to guide themselves in a kind of automated cognitive mentorship toward idea construction and testing.
Thank you. That's good. That's a good way to look at it. All right, I'm coming to you.
So just anecdotally, my oldest daughter is in CRNA school right now. And so she's a VCU student, that's Virginia Commonwealth University, but she's remote from Roanoke, Southwest Virginia. In any case, the quantity of work, and these are good students, you've had to have had at least 5 years of ICU working experience. So they're returning professionals, similar to what I think you've described. And the quantity of work is such that they use AI to test themselves as preparation and to synthesize and organize the quantity of information. There is no Virginia Commonwealth right now doesn't have a policy, and I can't imagine policing that kind of activity, right? I don't know how that would be possible unless they had a VCU issue, somebody has control of your hardware, of course, but it's so productive as an activity to feed, because honestly, it's impossible otherwise to to get through some of those programs because quantity. So I see it as being hugely valuable in many respects.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? I think AI has a great place in our space. I think learning how to use it appropriately. And I appreciated the earlier conversation that we had this morning of are we presenting AI that it's negative? And so what I'll say is I know in healthcare, because I'm working at a university, but we're working with nursing students where in the healthcare realm, AI is all over, like all over. And so I want to make sure that we, in this short term we have with them, to still acknowledge that AI is a real thing and that it can be helpful. So how can we use it? And so that's where I've been the most kind of relaxed about AI use, because my clear statement that's on my syllabus simply just is, I want the final product that you submit to be quality of your work. And so therefore, if the idea came from your query on AI, okay, but now that you've gotten that query, then now the information that you have provided, can you stand by it? And if you cannot, then whose work was this? And if you can, then that's what I want, is for you to have been able to develop that. So another just question, and I think this goes for all of us from being here today, which is why I think this was such a great space to come to, was what one small change can you make in your next course to better honor those students with learning in progress and not necessarily that final outcome? Anyone have any thoughts? Yeah.
I think iteration, right? Iterative reflection. If you are showcasing what your thinking process was, how did you get to that decision making? What was your brainstorming like? What was your outline like? How did you compile the research? How did you assess the research? And then present that. I think that if that process is structured and then showcased, we can show that's how they came to that. It shows original thought, but it also shows the process of how they got there.
Yeah, I think that's great, because sometimes just even having them to submit, what I've noticed by having them to submit to me their brainstorming, it helps me that when I can say, hey, it doesn't seem like you're on the right track, I do see some other things in your brainstorm that may have more detail to provide you the opportunity to scale this project up. And then we don't have to have them get on a phone call or a meeting to say, hey, tell me what else you were thinking about. And they're like, I already see that. When you submitted your assignment, I already saw your brainstorm of all the other things you were thinking through. And that helps guide that conversation to be a little bit more fruitful, because we're looking at the same thing.
I had one of our colleagues from our Student Professional Development Center or Career Center come to our writing class, and she said that companies, over 40% of them, the question now in the interview, when you're generally talking to a bot and not a person, is how do you plan to use AI in this company? So that might be a good question for your nursing students. How are you going to be using AI in the career? I think there's some professions we don't want. I don't know if I want my doctors. I'd have to think about this. But life and death things, I'm not quite sure yet how much AI I want them to be using.
Interesting enough, I read an article on LinkedIn just today, and they are actually saying that they are using AI technology that when you speak when you're talking within the first 30 words that you say, they're using AI to tell whether you have anxiety, depression, and those type of mental health disorders. So it's going to be interesting where healthcare takes us, and along with what AI is able to do.
So I took my mother-in-law to her cardiologist, and the first thing he said was, we're now using AI to summarize our appointment notes. Is that, he was asking permission. And she looked at him like, what? And I said, they're going to use a computer to summarize so that a person doesn't do that. Maybe, I don't know which is better, but and this guy was old too. He was a well-experienced practitioner, but it's everywhere, like you said.
Yes, it is. Right, it would be nice if they looked at you once.
And then, of course, there's the issue of how they use that data, right? Is it protected? If I were to make a small change, I should think that it would be something like diagnostic testing, pre-testing, that I can add then to the formative testing so that the learners can witness their own learning and kind of assuage their insecurities.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that is a huge piece to take away from this, that even just with a small change, by having them do some level of pre-writing to show them and you where they are, and then can show how they can elevate and advance through the use of AI, through the use of peer discussion, peer review, self-reflection. Those are all great ways that they can kind of enhance, but you can see it and say, this was your first writing assignment. And look at where you are now. And then also, just as Sakun mentioned, what was the process? I see you change this sentence. How and why did you come to that decision to change this sentence? And for me, in the work that I do, I'm working with nurses who I need them to critically think, right? So critical thinking becomes very important. And so having that opportunity to get them to critically think about this simple project can showcase that, hey, I see you're thinking now. I see we have a light bulb that's been turned on. And so that's the biggest piece that I think we can kind of take away from not necessarily the final product. And also when we look at it, how much weight are we putting on the grade of that one assignment? Well, if they are off track and they submit that one assignment at the end, getting them back on track is really tough. And there's an amount of tears I don't necessarily want to have to deal with when we could have gotten it on track a lot sooner by following a process. That is all I have. I'm not sure time-wise. Oh, it's 2:15. Well, thank y'all so much.